Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov's chess channel, and welcome to the TCEC Season 17 Premier Division. So finally, we have this situation in which all of these engines have played the same amount of chess games. So now, after 34 rounds, Leela C Zero is in the lead, which I basically thought that it would happen because Leela C Zero has played really great over the past couple of games, has won many games, although Leela C Zero has lost also one game. But as I said also in my previous seasons, it's very important to win games. In the previous season, Leela C Zero played too many draws. Now Leela is winning but also losing games, and now Leela took finally the lead. But don't be worried, I think Stockfish will be in the finals also because Stockfish is 2 whole points in front of Ellenstein, so I don't think that Ellenstein will catch up with Stockfish. So again, we'll have this super final between Leela C Zero and Stockfish. So today I wanted to show you the game from round 35 in which Leela C Zero showed really a great attacking skills, great positional and tactical skills, which is more important against this top engine Scorpio. It was really a great attacking game in this Reti opening, and I think it shows also some important principles in chess, which says when you get attacked, to find counter attacks and find the best active squares on the board, which is not so easy to make in chess games. Basically, when we get attacked, we retreat too much, and here in this game, that's why I decided to show this game. Leela will apply this important principle of this activity of the pieces and will crush its opponent very very easily. So let's check out the game. We have knight to f3 by Leela, knight to f6, g3, d6, so far the Reti opening. After d6, d4, g6, we have bishop to g2, still common theory, and after bishop to g7 we have the so-called Carlsbad setup. As I explained many times in my previous videos, the idea of whites is to create maybe this flexible pawn structure, get use of this bishop's activity. On the other hand, black's main strategical element here is to push the pawn on e5, try to close the center, but also if white tries maybe some d5 moves, then it will be a positional problem as this light square bishop would be trapped, would be blocked out by its own pawn. When you want maybe to know more about this principles, about this main strategical ideas about this opening, you should really check out my previous videos. I'm not going to explain so much of opening theory, I think, in this video. In the game, castling played by castling played by Scorpio, and now we have knight to c3, and here c6. The main idea is of course to block this bishop's activity, and if the position allows it, for instance if white pushes the pawn on d5, then we could close the center with the move c5. So this is the main setup. After the move castling, knight from b to d7 was played, and after b3 we have e5. And I wanted you also to know that this e5 was basically prearranged by this TCEC, so this move order had to be played. So now from this point on, the game will be continued with the main ideas by Leela C Zero and Scorpio. So far we have the game that is set up, but now the game will transpose into normal ideas by these two top engines. So here e4 played by Leela C Zero, which is the main idea. After the potential e takes d4, knight takes d4 to create this Moroxi-bind setup. I've also talked many times about this Moroxi-bind setup. The main idea about this setup is to create the space advantage in the center. But then again, you have these troubles with this light square bishop as it is blocked out by its own pawn on e4. So here Scorpio played the move rook to e8. The idea behind this move is to attack this weak e4 pawn. That's the main positional problem that white has to solve. And here Leela C Zero plays a very interesting idea, which is also common theory basically, but I think it's a must move in this opening preparation because black's main idea, if you for instance play bishop to b2 here, then e takes d4 is the main positional idea by black. Knight takes d4, and now after knight to c5, if you for instance try to cover with the rook, then you get bishop to g4. So this h3 move was very nice prophylactic move by Leela. After bishop to g4 you would be forced to play something like f3, bishop to d7, and I think black has solved now all of the positional problems at this bishop is further blocked out by its own pawn, so that's why here this h3 will not allow this types of position. Here e takes d4 was played, knight takes d4, again the same idea, knight to c5, but now rook to e1 works perfectly fine as a defense here, this e4 pawn. So we don't have so many worries now about this potential bishop to g4, and still have the flexibility to push, maybe if the position allows it, the pawn on f4, so getting even more space. Now a5, which is a very, very important positional move in this setup against the Maroczy bind. I've also talked many times about this a5 and knight to c5 setup in the Maroczy, against the Maroczy bind setup. I'll show you a link how to play against the Maroczy bind also at the end of this video. You can maybe try to fight as black against this setup. In the game, bishop to f4 was played. This is a very necessary move played by Leela C Zero. For instance, we could make the mistake and play the move bishop to b2. It seems also like a natural move, but then you get a4. You could try maybe to counterattack with the move b4, but then you get a3, and your bishop is out of game. That's the main problem, and black has really a great expansion on the queen side. This pawn will be very, very annoying to play against, so you don't want also to lose the bishop pair in an early stage of the game. For instance, if you take, we can take as it comes with the tempo, and now after d takes c5, and for instance something like knight to d7, this dark square bishop would be really the best minor piece on the board. So that's why you see how many mistakes you can make in an early stage of the game. That's why bishop to f4, although it seems we're not protecting the dark squares, but basically we still have a good protection here on dark squares, as the queen is covering the knight on d4. Bishop knight to h5 doesn't work. It seems also like an aggressive move. We can play simply bishop to e3. The e4 pawn is not attacked anymore, and now we're still covering our knight on d4. Still with this Maroczy bind setup, we are continuing with this very important space advantage. So I wanted to show you really this very, very important move now, bishop to f4. In the game, a4 was played anyway by Scorpio, and now b4. Knight to e6, also a very necessary move. Of course, we don't want to retreat with the knight on a6. Then b5 would be very, very dangerous, would be a pawn breakthrough, or even c5 would be the possibility. Here, knight takes e6 was played. Bishop takes e6 was also a necessary move. We are at least counterattacking the c4 pawn, but our main problem from black's perspective is the pawn on d6. You could make a mistake. You could take with the f pawn. It seems that we have now, of course, a very powerful center, but the d6 pawn is hanging, and rook to e6 is also not working because we have the move rook to c1. This is a calm move, but it comes with an attack against this a4 pawn. So black would be forced to play something like a3 here, but now c5, I think, breaks the position immediately. This bishop is really bad. It's blocked out by its own rook. This d6 pawn is hanging. After something like knight to e8, I still think we can make progress with queen to d1, rook to queen to d2, rook to d1, and simply attacking this d6 weakness, as black has some troubles to connect some heavy artillery on the d5 on the 8th rank. That's what I meant, and I still think it will be really hard for black to solve this positional problem. So that's why bishop to e6. It was a necessary move, and now bishop takes d6, knight to d7, attacking the knight on c3, and now e5, closing the center, and bishop takes c4. So Scorpio grabbed back the pawn, the material is equal, but this bishop on d6 is really really an annoying piece. It aims here really on dark squares, and the problem from black's perspective is that you don't want, in this early stage of the game at least, you don't want to trade off your dark square bishop as you're continuing then the game with some dark square problems around the king. So several positional problems that Scorpio has to solve here in the game. Rook to e4, and that's what I meant about this activity. When we have the pieces on the best active squares, the knight is perfectly fine. Basically, it's hard for the knight to find maybe a good path. Knight to e4 doesn't work. You lose your e5 pawn. The bishop's activity is perfectly fine. This rook is also a possibility, maybe to play something like rook to c1, but again, this e5 weakness remains. That's why rook to e4, very nice counter-attacking move. it seems that the rook is endangered, but the problem is you cannot play bishop to d5 as the knight is covering that square, so that's why bishop to e6, and now queen to e2. At least now we have solved this problem about this e5 pawn. Nothing can attack this pawn. That's the main problem for black here. Still, black is continuing, white is continuing the game with this very active bishop. In the game, knight to b6 was played with the idea maybe to attack if the position allows it. This annoying bishop on d6 with the move knight to c4. So far, it's not possible, but as a positional idea, we could also maybe try knight to c8. Rook to d1. You see how these rooks now work in the position. Here, knight to d5 was played, finally closing the d file. Knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, and now rook to e3. Still, this rook is very active. Bishop to e6 was played, and now a3. This is a good move, of course, supporting our b4 pawn. Now, basically, we have solved, from white's perspective, all of the positional problems. Now it's time for attack. So how to attack here? In the game, queen to b6 was played. Of course, queen to b2, because we are not allowing some f6 pawn breakthroughs. This would be releasing pressure idea by black to simply play the move f6, liberate our bishop, then create also some dangerous attacks on the star square diagonal. And in the game, bishop to b3 was played. Here, Leela C Zero again plays a very active move with the rook to d4. Although this rook seems to be a little bit loose on the board, but they're really active. We cannot find basically improvements of the position of this bishop. This bishop is perfectly fine. This bishop is perfectly fine. Again, the queen is aiming at least on this diagonal, preventing this f6 idea. This rook is perfectly fine. So the only piece that needs improvement is this rook to d4 played by Leela C Zero. And now f6, finally this releasing pressure idea, but now bishop to c5, queen to c7, and now queen to d2. For instance, if you try here b6, it seems like a good move, but then you get crushed immediately because the activity on the d file is too much to handle. So here rook to d7 would be the idea. You have to play queen to b6 in order to protect your b6 pawn, but now simply e takes f6. After bishop takes f6, we have bishop to d4, and as I said, when we trade off this dark square bishop, then you would have several dark square weaknesses around the king. Queen to d4 comes in the game, maybe with some checkmate ideas here, even on g7. So that's why here by Scorpio simply took f takes e5, not playing this b6 move, and Leela C Zero played on this idea to finally grab some space on the 7th rank. Rook to d7. This rook is really dangerous. So here queen to c8 was played, and now bishop to b6, improving even further the position of this bishop. This bishop is really annoying. Although you cannot trade it off. As I said, when we try to trade it off, then we have some weaknesses. When we don't trade it off, it creates further attacking possibilities. The problem is now, for instance, if you trade, let's see, a bad move, rook to e6, then you get rook to d8, you lose your queen. That's the main tactical threat now by Leela C Zero. So in the game, bishop to h6 was played with the pinning idea here by Scorpio, and now f4. Here bishop to c4 was played. Let's see a possible continuation if you play e takes f4. It seems like a natural idea, it seems like a good idea. The idea is, of course, if we trade off the rooks on the e file, then we can play queen takes e8, and now this rook to d8 idea doesn't work, as we can capture the rook with our rook from a8. So that's why here you may think that this solves all of the positional problems, but basically Leela C Zero has prepared really some nasty tactics here. Here the possibility is to play the move rook takes b3. After a takes b3, you get a very tricky move, bishop to d5. And again, I'm pointing out how many pieces are activated by black, how many are not. So this rook is not playing in the game, so basically it's like black is playing without the piece. So after bishop to d5, let's see, c takes d5, queen takes d5, and you get checkmated. Here king to h8. Okay, here we have the possibility bishop to d4, and you have to cover with the bishop. Bishop takes g7, and it's game over. So the only maybe move that makes something happen, I don't know, is to bring the rook in between, but again you lose further material, and again the same tactics work. So you see, tricky stuff. Rook to b3 would be really here a monster move. So as I said, this is great tactics by Leela C Zero. So that's why bishop to c4, getting out of this potential rook to b3 idea. In the game, rook to d3 was played, again offering the rook for the exchange. Great attacking maneuver here by Leela. Let's see again a possible continuation. If you take bishop takes d3, then we have queen takes d3. You could try maybe bishop to g7 in order to bring finally a new defender in front of the king, but now f takes e5 was played. Bishop takes e5 doesn't work, as you get queen to c4. You see how dangerous the position around the black king is on light squares. You have maybe king to h8, but now queen to f7, sneaking in with the queen with some checkmate threats on h7. You would be forced, I think, here to give up the queen after queen takes d7. Black is lost. So you see, even this bishop takes d3 idea doesn't work. So again, Leela C Zero is offering the rook for the exchange, but as I said, the light square problems here, you see the problems around black's king are too much to handle. So that's why, of course, Scorpio calculated all of that and didn't take the rook. So in the game, rook to f8. Here Scorpio tries to regroup a little bit, but now again rook to d6. You see how Leela C Zero is moving up ranks, simply creating new attacking possibilities in the game. Now finally e takes f4 was played, but that's not the point. We are trying here to checkmate. Queen to d4 with this an attack on the bishop. Bishop to f7 had to be played, but now rook takes f7. Again, sacrificing the rook. King takes f7 doesn't work, as you get checked and also probably checkmated. So that's why rook takes f7 had to be played, but now comes this main tactical idea, rook to d8. And now after queen takes d8, bishop takes d8, we have a position in which white has the queen and the bishop for two rooks. It's winning, but still you have to be careful. Black has some time now to regroup. Black has also the pawn majority on the queen side, but still it's very hard here to produce a pass pawn. You cannot do that very fast, so that's why here bishop to g7, now queen to d6. Again, Leela C Zero plays with the queen on the most active square. F takes g3 was played, and now bishop to f1 with the idea to play bishop to c4 and create the spinning idea on the rook. So that's why king to h8 was played, and now bishop to d3. We have rook to f8, bishop to b6, rook to e8, and now finally h4, because we want to liberate this diagonal and try attacks now against this h7 square. Even sacrificing a pawn is an option here. You don't have so many worries, I think, although the rooks are very dangerous, but the problem is you cannot include the bishop into the game. You would love to play some bishop to d4 ideas, some bishop to d4 checks, but this bishop, as I said, is still our main attacking possibility. The main idea is now to get rid of these dark square bishops and create also some dangerous checks on dark squares, and followed with the bishop. With the bishop we could create some light square checks. So this black's king is really endangered here, although with many pieces on the board, but still rook to e1 was tried here by Scorpio. Another problem, we have king to g2. Rook to f2 doesn't work, as this bishop is covering this square very well. So rook to e8, we have bishop to c5, now rook to d1, and now queen to d7. We have rook to g8, and here probably Scorpio hopes for a draw, but now comes this idea, h5, breaking through in the position. If you take g takes h5, then you get queen to f5 with the checkmate threat. I'm not seeing a good way. You would probably lose your rook here. You would sacrifice the rook for the bishop here. So that's why after the move h5, here rook to d2 was played. Not a problem. We can simply take out this pawn. A check is a check, of course, but it's not so dangerous, as we can move the king to f3. The king is perfectly fine here, as you cannot include this rook in the attack. As I said, this bishop, I think Scorpio is dreaming about. This bishop has some nightmares. This is really the most annoying piece that I've seen recently. So after the move king takes g3, here bishop to f6 was played by Scorpio, trying to hang on to this position, but now bishop to e3, again creating a simple threat on the rook, rook to d1, and now h6. So now the position is even worse for black, because black of course didn't take, but now again our main positional idea here is to play bishop to d4, trade off the dark square bishops, and create some checkmate threats on g7. So in the game, rook to d8 was played, not a problem. Queen to e6, we have bishop to a1, bishop to c4, rook to d6, and now queen to f7, rook to d7, queen to f1, we have rook to d1, and here Leela C Zero basically had a hard time to find the winning sequence, but played also some perpetual moves. But then after queen to rook to d7, queen to e6, here rook to d6 was played, and now queen to e4. That's the winning move, as the main idea is now, as I said, to get rid somehow of the star square bishop, playing sort of a Zugzwang position, and when we get these bishops off the board, then we could create some checkmate threats. b5 was played, and you see now this dark square bishop comes into the game. The main tactical idea is to trade off those bishops. As I said, in the game, b takes c4 was played, and now bishop takes d6. Here Scorpio gave up further material. After bishop to f6, we have queen to e6, bishop to d4, but now comes this move, bishop to e5, bishop takes e5, queen takes e5, and with the support of this very, very cool pawn, Leela C Zero delivers a checkmate, and it was game over. Great attacking game, I think, by Leela C Zero, with some great activities of the pieces. As I said, the Leela C Zero is now in the lead of this Premier Division with the whole point in front of Stockfish. Leela C Zero has won, I think, 9 or 10 games, has lost only one game. So incredible performance by this top engine, and as I said, we'll probably see this top final, super final, this final between Leela C Zero and Stockfish, and I cannot wait till that happens. Till that, we'll follow some more games of this TCEC Season 17. Meanwhile, you can watch my other commented chess games played by computers with some more Alpha Zero, Leela Zero, Stockfish games, and many more. And you can also watch my best chess games of all time if you want to see the best chess games by humans that were played in chess history. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thanks you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.